Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel and blog. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another tutorial. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to use faux watercoloring, or in other words, we spritz on the stamp. And it lends a really nice watercolored look. It's definitely an artistic look versus the sharp lines of a stamp that will come off into a handmade card project. For the sentiment, I am using a Stitched Shapes framelit die together with a layering square framelit die and the Designer Tea stamp set. For the colors, I'm keeping them all in the same type of color tones. I have Sweet Sugar Plum, Perfect Plum, Elegant Eggplant, and then I brought in some yellows from Delightful Daffodil, and I've got Pear Pizzazz. So these colors all have the same type of look to them. There's a brightness, but not an overpowering brightness to them. And so that's why I chose them to work together, as they will all have the same color tone family. So to do this watercolor technique, start off with a piece of watercolor paper and a water brush, and also some type of a misting bottle or a Stampin' spritzer. The spritzer from Stampin' Up is really small and it fits directly in the palm of your hand, and it puts out a very fine mist. It works perfectly for this technique. Depending on how much ink is left on the stamp will determine the amount that's going to transfer over to the paper once it has been spritzed. Sometimes whenever you're doing this technique, then you can have water or ink pool up on an image, and so that's when I use that water brush to kind of smooth it back out. I do want to get the look of watercolor, and that is possible with using the spritzer because it moves around and dilutes the ink. However, I don't want to take away from that watercolored look by messing everything up with my water brush. So sometimes using a second generation of ink, such as I'm doing here with the purple, what it will do is allow a lighter shade of the same color to go off and to be less ink mixed with the water, and so that's going to get definitely more of a muddled look. So if it starts pooling up in the places that you don't want it to, use your water brush, or you can use a regular standard paintbrush dipped in water and just kind of float all of the liquid back around to where it lays out evenly. You could choose to have it in the way that it stamps off and muddles and pools in certain areas. That's a nice look as well. However, that's not what I was going for today. For this project, I had in mind that I wanted all of the images to kind of have a hazy springtime look that would allow me to kind of make things look a little bit translucent. And as we see the finished card, you'll see that I want it to bring in a little bit of a background for sunshine and some fairy dust. So here is the large image, and what I did was start off with all of the small flower stamps so that I could make them appear further in the background when they were stamped, and the one that's closer to the front would be a larger flower. This is the way my eye would see it in nature, and so I'm trying to get the same type of look in this project. I'm smoothing out all of the edges of the stamp to make sure that I don't get ink pooled up in one particular spot. And I'm going right back over the stamp again with another coating of ink. So I've got a foundation of muddled ink, and then I've gone back over that to get a little bit more of a sharper image. If you notice, I am cleaning my stamps today with a microfiber cloth that I've picked up from a dollar store. and I wet it with water and spritz it with Stampin' Mist stamp cleaner. Whenever I'm doing a lot of this type of work, I find it really quick and easy to use a microfiber cloth. You could use a very strong type of paper towel, something that's not going to leave any lint behind. Or what's really perfect are baby burp rags. I still have a couple of those around, and surprisingly, they work really, really well in crafting. Here is a little bit of a DIY mask that I'm making. Instead of cutting out the flower image, I just wanted an area that has a flower to be masked off so that I can put the image of a leaf coming out behind it. So as you can see, I just tore the post-it note to get the look that I needed, just that shape. Place it over the flower, and the post-it note will leave no residue behind, so I can use it in masking with no fears at all. Sometimes when I use washi tape in projects, it will bring some of the paper back off, which is really frustrating in a crafting project. But I find post-it notes will get the job done when possible. Here is a little bit of color directly onto the paper with the water brush that I'm using to kind of fill in some of the areas that were left white. In between the color, the flowers is okay to be white to a certain degree. However, on the look of this card, I was imagining a flower bed in the sunshine that would be abundant with flowers. And so this is me trying to get a little bit more of that design in an easy way. And as you can see now, I'm adding just some leaves to the project, pardon me, that are not stamped, but they are just kind of freehand shape, the same shape as the stamp, as the rubber stamp. So here is the yellow that I'm bringing into the project, and I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. It is actually So Saffron ink instead of Delightful Daffodil. And I want to go around the outside of the images with some of the ink, and then as I get the ink onto the watercolor paper, I'll clean that brush off and use just the water that's in the water brush to bring the color and dilute it out toward the edge of the paper. So what is the reason that I do this is because I want more color to be closer to the images than is out on the rest of the paper. So I want to get a look that is kind of fading out into white, but I want it to still be yellow up against the stamped images. So you can actually wet the whole surface of the paper that you're trying to get some color into, as I'm doing now. And as you add the drops of ink in between all of the stamped images, then the water will pull the ink out away from where you dropped it in a natural way. It'll bring everything out, and you can add as much or as little as you like. I want it to have the color concentration there, but I didn't want to have an entirely yellow background. I hope that translates out well. You can kind of play back the video to see how I colored it out. I'm using a really strong adhesive. I'm using a whole lot of snail for this project. Sometimes I use fast fuse when I'm working with watercolor paper. However, I already had out the snail adhesive, and so I just was very generous with it. Watercolor paper, when it has been wet, it will fold up and it'll kind of buckle, but it doesn't always want to go back down. It will go back into place, and you can certainly help this out by taping your work down to a hard board surface. A clipboard works really good for this. It's that manufactured fiber board that remains really firm, and you can use washi tape or some painter's tape to hold down your project. Here is a generous amount of dimensionals foam adhesive to hold this project in place because I didn't want the watercolor paper to pull everything back up once I had put so much time and effort into this. I'm using more snail adhesive to adhere the stitched square down to the layering square, and for the layering squares I used one of the little scallops. It reminds me of a postage stamp look, or what postage stamps used to look like back in the day. And I'm choosing where I want to place this sentiment. I originally had wanted it to sit in the bottom right hand corner. However, I feel that the best place for it, even though it's covering up that really large flower, I think it kind of sits there and doesn't distract away from the project as a whole. Thank you guys for joining me for another tutorial. I invite you over to my blog at jennystampsup for more card making inspiration.
Hi, my name is Trip. Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.